John, a humble farmer, holds a mysterious envelope that could change the fate of the coveted Oakwood Ranch. Among old documents and promises from the past, a story of love and resilience will reveal that some lands hold far more value than money. The truck dealership Premium Motors gleamed under the afternoon sun, its shiny windows reflecting the brilliance of the vehicles on display like jewels in a showcase. The air-conditioned environment and marble floors created an atmosphere of luxury that starkly contrasted with the figure who had just walked through its doors. James, a man in his 60s, walked with steady steps despite his white cane gently, tapping the ground ahead of him. The salesman exchanged puzzled glances. Richard, the manager in his well-tailored suit, seemed even more impeccable as he approached the unexpected visitor, his polite smile barely masking the disdain in his voice. "May I help you, sir? Perhaps you have the wrong address?" James smiled serenely, his eyes lost in the horizon he could no longer see. "There's no confusion at all. I came to buy a truck. I need something sturdy, with a capacity of at least 12 tons. A muffled laugh echoed through the showroom. Brian, the youngest salesman, whispered something to his colleague, Charles, who barely held back a chuckle. Richard maintained his professional demeanor, though his tone now carried an even more evident note of condescension. "Sir, excuse me, what is your name?" "James. Just James." "Mr. James, our vehicles are... well, let's say they are for a very specific audience. We have partner dealerships that might be able to serve you better." It was at that moment that Peter, the young mechanic from the shop, entered the showroom coming from the workshop. His curious eyes settled on the unusual scene unfolding before him. There was something different about that simple-looking gentleman, a dignity that seemed to shine brighter than all the polished chrome in the store. "The engine in the new model has the latest generation common rail electronic injection, doesn't it?" James asked, his voice calm but firm. "I heard the torque was increased by 15% compared to the previous version." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the air conditioning. Peter approached, intrigued. "You are correct, sir. Actually, it's a 17% increase in torque, with a significant reduction in fuel consumption." James nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "The redesigned air intakes must have contributed to that, and I imagine the ABS braking system has been updated to compensate for the increase in power." Peter couldn't hide his astonishment. How could a man who couldn't see demonstrate such deep knowledge about technical specifications that even some salespeople were unaware of? Richard cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. James, these vehicles cost—" "I know exactly how much they cost," James interrupted softly. "And I also know they're worth every penny for the right purpose." It was then that he pulled an old yellowed photograph from his pocket. Even without being able to see it, his fingers traced the contours of the paper tenderly. "There's a phrase written here," he said, handing the photo to Peter, who took it carefully. "Never give up on your own," the young mechanic read aloud. The photo showed an old truck, a model from the 80s, parked in front of a lush plantation. Peter noticed there were more people in the image, but time had made it difficult to distinguish their faces. "Are you a farmer?" Peter asked, as the salespeople began to disperse, losing interest in that unlikely customer. "I am someone who made a promise," James replied enigmatically, "and I intend to keep it, no matter how many doors have to open or close in the process." At that moment, an elegant couple entered the store and Richard hurried to assist them, leaving James and Peter alone near the entrance. The young mechanic observed the older man for a few moments, realizing there was much more to that story than met the eye. "Why don't you tell me more about this promise?" Peter asked, pulling up a chair for James. "I have a feeling there's an interesting story behind it." James settled into the chair, his cane resting on his knees. "There are stories, young man, that only make sense when we start in the middle, and others that need to be lived to be understood." Peter looked again at the photograph in his hands, trying to decipher the secrets that faded image held. What would lead a blind man to walk into a luxury truck dealership with such certainty about what he was looking for? And what kind of promise could motivate him to face scornful looks with such serenity? The answer to these questions, Peter realized, was only beginning to unfold, like a ball of yarn that, when pulled, reveals unexpected patterns and surprising stories. and something told him that that afternoon in the showroom would only be the first chapter of a much larger story than anyone there could imagine. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from, and stay tuned. Peter led James to a quieter area of the store, away from curious glances and muffled laughter. The young mechanic couldn't contain his curiosity about the man who demonstrated such deep knowledge about trucks, despite his visual condition. "Did you work in transportation before?" asked Peter, as they settled into a more secluded corner of the showroom. James adjusted himself in the chair, his hands resting on the cane with an old familiarity. "Not exactly," he replied, an enigmatic smile dancing on his lips. "But I've learned that sometimes we need to become what our community needs." It was then that James began to share his story. He was the leader of an agricultural cooperative that brought together more than 50 families in a rural area a few hours away. People who, due to different life circumstances, found in the land their last hope for a fresh start. "We have everything there," James explained, his face lighting up as he spoke. Teachers who lost their jobs, business owners who saw their shops close, young people who discovered farming as an alternative to unemployment in the cities. Each one brought their stories, their struggles, but also their dreams. Peter listened attentively, realizing there was much more to the story than he had initially imagined. "And how did you become their leader?" "I didn't become a leader, young man. I was simply the first to believe that together we could build something greater than ourselves." As they spoke, the store continued its usual bustle. Salespeople moved around with well-dressed clients, showcasing the latest in luxury trucks. The contrast between that environment and the reality described by James couldn't have been greater. "Our production has been growing every year," James continued. "We started with a small community garden, and today we grow various types of produce, but transportation has always been our biggest challenge. We rely on third parties to take our produce to the distribution centers, and it has cost us dearly. In the last harvest, we lost almost half of the production because the truck we hired never showed up." Peter felt a lump in his throat. The image of food spoiling while families depended on that income to survive was deeply unsettling. "That's when we decided we needed to have our own truck," James explained, his voice carrying a mix of determination and hope. Each family contributed what they could. Some sold belongings, others took on extra jobs. The children even organized their craft fair. From the pocket of his simple shirt, James pulled out an envelope. "Here is every penny we've saved over the last 3 years. It's not just money, Peter. It's dreams, sacrifices, and the trust that 50 families have placed in me." Peter took the envelope with reverence, feeling the weight of the responsibility that man carried. "Have you already chosen which model you'd like to see?" "Actually, I've studied all of them. The T440 model would be perfect for our needs. It has the ideal load capacity and the most fuel-efficient consumption in its category." At that moment, Richard, the manager, approached again, drawn by the lengthy conversation between Peter and the unexpected visitor. His expression had subtly changed, the initial condescension giving way to poorly disguised curiosity. "Sorry for interrupting, but I couldn't help but notice you're discussing technical specifications," said Richard. "You seem to know quite a bit about the subject," James smiled. "When you can't see with your eyes, you learn to see in other ways. I've spent the last 3 years studying every detail of these trucks, talking to drivers, mechanics, reading technical specifications that my granddaughter translated into Braille. I can't afford to make the wrong choice. There are many people depending on this decision." Richard took the envelope Peter was holding, and upon opening it, his eyebrows raised in surprise. The amount of money inside was considerable, though still short of the truck's total value. "Mr. James," Richard began, his tone now more respectful, "this is a significant amount, but it's still not enough to—" "I know," James interrupted, calmly. "That's why I also brought this." And he pulled out a carefully folded document from his briefcase. Peter and Richard watched as James explained what that paper represented, a story of perseverance that was about to take another important step, revealing that behind this seemingly simple man lay a web of connections and stories that no one in that store could have imagined. The document James presented was a contract with a major supermarket chain, interested in buying all the organic produce from the cooperative. The only condition was that they themselves would handle the transportation of the products, ensuring quality and timely deliveries. This contract represents the chance to transform the lives of 50 families, James explained, his fingers gently tracing the pages. But without the truck, it's just a piece of paper. Peter picked up his phone and began showing Richard a video he had discreetly recorded during the conversation with James. On the screen, the farmer's face lit up as he spoke about the cooperative, the shared dreams, and the strength of unity among those families. "Can I share something with you?" Peter asked, scrolling through his phone. While we were talking, I looked up the cooperative. On the phone screen, images from a local news report appeared. It showed children helping in the community garden, elderly people teaching planting techniques to young people, and a diverse group of individuals working together under the sun. In one of the videos, an elderly woman was moved to tears as she harvested her first tomatoes. "This is Mrs. Martha," James commented, recognizing the voice in the video. "She lost everything she had in a financial scam. Today she oversees our organic production and teaches cooking classes for the kids in the cooperative." Richard watched in silence, his expression gradually changing. The images told a different story from the one he had imagined when he saw James walk into the store. It wasn't just a man looking to buy a truck. It was an entire community seeking an opportunity to thrive. "And here," Peter continued, showing another video, "I found something interesting about you, James." On the screen, an older news report appeared. The photo showed James as a younger man, still with his sight, standing next to a truck very similar to the one in the old photo he carried. The reporter was interviewing him about his successful transportation company. "You were—" Richard began, but James gently interrupted him. "Yes, I had one of the largest transportation companies in the region, but that was a long time ago, before the accident that took my sight." His voice carried no bitterness, only serenity. "I lost everything, except the most important thing, the ability to start over and help others do the same." Peter continued, browsing through the reports. "The cooperative started on the land that used to belong to your old company, right?" James nodded. "When I lost my sight, many thought I had also lost the ability to be useful, but I discovered that sometimes we need to lose something to see what truly matters. I transformed the abandoned warehouses into greenhouses, the truck yard into community gardens, and people started coming, each with their own story of starting over." Richard picked up the envelope with the money again, now looking at it with different eyes. "You said you studied all of our models. How did you manage to do that without—" "Technology is a great ally," James smiled. "My 12-year-old granddaughter helped me a lot. She read all the technical specifications, described the details, turned numbers into stories I could understand. You know, when you lose one sense, the others sharpen. I learned to listen to the sound of the engines, to feel the different vibrations of each model, to understand the mechanics in a way I might never have learned if I could still see." A small crowd of employees had already gathered around them, drawn by the extraordinary story unfolding. Brian and Charles, the same salesmen who had laughed at the beginning, now listened with evident discomfort and admiration. "But we're still a bit short of the full amount," Richard observed, though his tone no longer carried the same initial disbelief. "I have one more thing to show," Peter interjected, pulling up another video on his phone. "I found this on the cooperative social media." On the screen, dozens of familiar, smiling faces appeared one after another. They were the members of the cooperative, each holding a sign with a message of gratitude to James. Children, adults, and the elderly, all united in a single purpose, to show gratitude to the one who had given them a new chance. The last sign, held by a little girl Peter recognized as James's granddaughter, read, "Grandpa, you taught us to see with our hearts. Now it's our turn to help you achieve your dream." The silence that followed the video was broken by the sound of applause. The store employees, now all gathered around James, showed genuine admiration. Richard discreetly wiped away a tear before clearing his throat and regaining his professional demeanor. "Mr. James," he began, his voice carrying a new tone of respect, "I would like to make you an offer. Grabbing a calculator, Richard started crunching numbers. After a few minutes of deliberation with other managers, who had also gathered around, he turned to James. "Our store has never done anything like this before, but we would like to offer you a special discount on the T440 model. In addition, we will include a complete package of preventive maintenance for 2 years. Peter smiled, observing the complete transformation in the environment. The same salespeople who used to make jokes were now offering to help with the documentation process. Brian, in particular, insisted on organizing a special training session for anyone who would be driving the truck. "There's one more thing," added Charles, the other salesperson. "My brother-in-law owns a specialized workshop. I can talk to him about doing the inspections at a discounted rate after the warranty period is over." James remained calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he held his cane. "You have no idea what this means," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "It's not just a truck you're selling. It's the fulfillment of a dream for people who learned never to give up, even when everything seemed lost." As the paperwork was being prepared, Peter noticed something on the old photo he still held. Turning it over, he discovered a faded inscription, "To my son, James. May you never forget, a man's true worth is not in what he possesses, but in what he is capable of doing for others. With love, your father." "It was the last gift I ever received." "From him," James explained, noticing Peter's silence. "He was a truck driver and spent his life helping people. When I lost my sight, this photo became my guiding light. I could no longer see the image, but the words remained etched in my heart." The signing of the documents was a solemn moment. Richard made sure to read each clause aloud, explaining every term in detail. When it came time to make the payment, James took out not only the money from the envelope, but also dozens of handwritten letters from the members of the cooperative. "Each one of these bills has a story," he explained. "There's the money Mrs. Martha saved by selling cakes, the savings Mr. John set aside by skipping breakfast, and the coins the children collected from their craft fair. It's not just a business transaction. It's proof that when people come together for a greater purpose, miracles happen." By late afternoon, as James was getting ready to leave, Peter offered to accompany him to the cooperative. "It would be an honor to meet the people behind these stories," he said. "You will always be welcome," James replied with a smile. "In fact, all of you are. Sometimes we need to step out of our comfort zone to see the world through different eyes." The new truck gleamed under the setting sun as Peter started it up to leave. Beside him, James held the old photo in one hand and his cane in the other, a serene smile on his face. "You know, Peter," he said as they left the store, "there's something I've learned over all these years. It's not the circumstances that define who we are, but rather what we choose to do with them. Today, we didn't just buy a truck, we planted a seed of hope." Dear listeners, we hope James's story has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. To continue this journey of stories that make us believe in the power of unity and perseverance, we've prepared a special playlist with equally inspiring narratives. Find it here by clicking on the left. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Share your own stories of overcoming challenges and unity in the comments, because every story deserves to be told and every voice deserves to be heard. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.